If you're looking for some news that might completely derail Trump's legislative agenda, it looks like what Republican Rand Paul just said on air.
Somebody has to stand up and yell, "The emperor has no clothes," and everybody's falling in lockstep on this. Pass the big, beautiful bill. Don't question anything. Well, conservatives do need to stand up and have their voice heard. This is a problem we've been facing for decades now, and if we don't stand up on it, I really fear the direction the country is going.
Now, that right there is a direct shot at Trump's signature legislation. Rand Paul is essentially calling the big, beautiful bill that Trump is ushering through a fraud, and he's signaling that he's prepared to vote against it. And here's why this is so significant. Republicans can only afford 3 defections in the Senate, because once they hit 4, this bill dies completely. And the math here is simple. Republicans have a narrow 53 to 47 majority in the Senate. They're using budget reconciliation to pass the bill, which means they need a simple majority, but they can't lose more than 3 votes. If 4 Republicans defect, the bill is dead. And if his position holds, Rand Paul just became defection number 1. His comments this morning seem less like subtle political positioning than an outright declaration that he's voting no. Josh Hawley's also planted his flag against stripping Medicaid away from 14 million Americans, which the CBO has already declared this bill would do.
Do you agree with the Speaker? Is this bill not a cut to Medicaid?
Well, the right thing to do is not to cut Medicaid, so I'm glad to hear him say that. Manu, it ought to be just a basic foundational principle. It is wrong to cut health care for the working poor, and that's what we're talking about here with Medicaid. My state is a Medicaid expansion state. Over 20% of Missourians, including hundreds of thousands of children, are on Medicaid. And Manu, they're not on Medicaid because they want to be. They're on Medicaid because they cannot afford health insurance in the private market. These are working people and their children who need health care. And it's just wrong to go and cut their health care when they're trying to make ends meet, trying to help their kids, trying to make sure that they're able to provide for their families. So I hope that the House GOP and the Senate GOP will get the message here. By the way, President Trump has said the same thing. No Medicaid benefit cuts.
In other words, unless Josh Hawley pretends that a bill that will cut Medicaid from 14 million Americans somehow doesn't cut Medicaid from 14 million Americans, which, to be clear, is entirely possible because their shamelessness knows no bounds, then he'll likely be the second defection. And then, of course, there are 2 Republican senators who should be absolutely terrified about this bill, Susan Collins of Maine and Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, because both of their states have massive numbers of people on Medicaid who could lose coverage if this bill passes. Let me give you the numbers that are likely keeping Collins and Murkowski up at night. In Alaska, over 246,000 people are enrolled in Medicaid. That's about 1/3 of the entire state population. In Maine, over 320,000 people are on Medicaid. And that's nearly 1/4 of the state's population. Think about what this means politically. Susan Collins would have to go back to Maine and explain to 320,000 people of her constituents why she voted to take away their health care. Lisa Murkowski would have to face 246,000 Alaskans and tell them that their Medicaid coverage is being eliminated to fund tax cuts for billionaires. And these aren't abstract numbers. These are working families, elderly people in nursing homes, children with chronic illnesses, and people with disabilities. In Alaska, over 70,000 people gained coverage through Medicaid expansion alone. Collins and Murkowski would be voting to rip healthcare away from massive portions of their own states. And here's the political reality that Democrats have to understand here. Collins and Murkowski are already nervous about this bill. They both expressed concerns about cuts to social programs in the past. They're both from states that rely heavily on federal programs. And they're both moderate Republicans who care about their reputations. This is the moment, then, for Democrats to apply maximum pressure. Every Democrat should be calling out Collins and Murkowski by name. They should be running ads in Maine and Alaska showing exactly how many people would lose their coverage. They should be holding press conferences with Medicaid recipients from both states. The reality is that Rand Paul just gave Collins and Murkowski political cover to vote against this bill. Instead of being the only Republicans opposing Trump, they can now join Paul in standing up to what he's calling an emperor with no clothes. In fact, between Paul and Hawley, the criticism comes from both the left and right. You've got Paul saying that it's fiscally irresponsible and betrays conservative principles to vote for this bill, and you've got Hawley admitting that this bill is going to hurt Medicaid recipients. So whatever justification you're looking for not to support this bill, it's there. The fact that Paul feels compelled to speak out may actually suggest that other Republican senators are having similar concerns but are afraid to voice them publicly. Let's be honest here. These people in the GOP aren't exactly beacons of honesty and independence. They mostly exist to serve at the altar of their God King. And they know that if they speak out, they'll likely invite a primary challenge bolstered by Donald Trump and probably funded by Elon Musk. Perhaps Rand Paul is giving them the cover that they need not to feel like they're walking the plank alone. But either way, the Democratic strategy should be clear. Make this vote about Hawley and Collins and Murkowski's own constituents. Force them to explain why they are prioritizing tax cuts for billionaires over health care for hundreds of thousands of people in their own states. And call them. I spoke with Elizabeth Warren just days ago, back when the bill was still working its way through the House, and she highlighted the need to flood the phone lines of members of Congress, but the same concept applies here in the Senate. Collins, Murkowski, and Hawley are not immune to public pressure.
People have power. And when we talk about the fight right now in the House, listen, part of it is the Republicans are even more extreme, saying more babies need to lose health care, more people need to go hungry. But there's a bunch of other Republicans saying, wait just a minute, we're all going to be up for re-election in 2026. And starting to do a little of the, maybe we should have cold feet about this. So this is the moment for people to pick up the phone, to get on email, to text their representatives in the House. And this is true whether your reps are Democrats or Republicans. Call them, text them, email them. And if you've already done that once, do it again. Do it again and do it again. Because it is in play right now. So nobody has to accept this is how it always is. The ball is in the air, right? And where this is going to come down is literally in the fight in Washington, D.C., on Capitol Hill, as you and I speak. This is the moment to get involved in that fight.
Again, our job right now, as this bill works its way through the Senate, is to make this vote impossible for these senators to cast. The emperor has no clothes, as Rand Paul said. Now it's time for Democrats to make sure everyone can see it. Before you go, if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more and support independent media, please subscribe to this channel. The subscribe button will be right here on the screen. But second, the reality is that we are now in a political environment where this administration can lean on any of the social media platforms to suppress certain voices if they don't like critical coverage. That means my longevity here is in the hands of a few tech billionaires who are already making it clear that they are willing to cater to this administration. To that end, signing up for my newsletter is a way for me to reach you directly if that ever becomes necessary. I'll put the link right here on the screen as well, so please sign up. It's free, but there's also an option to do a paid subscription if you'd like to support me and my team. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching.